Who's sitting here? It's Vinnie Penn from the Vinnie Penn Project. What are you doing here and not on the radio?
I'm here. When Ann Nyberg tells you to jump, you say how high. You know how it goes.
We're talking about this awesome book that just came out, Route 1 Food Run.
Yes, ma'am.
Which I'm picturing you got in the car or a truck or a van and you drove
Van's a little sketchy.
Okay, well, whatever it was, I-95 all the way up to Maine.
Yeah.
And you stopped and you, I'm guessing you harassed some of the restaurateurs to give you recipes.
Yeah, well, the recipe thing came later, and the harassing, they were contacted in advance via the telephone. I didn't drop in and give the hard pitch right there and then. No, everybody knew I was coming.
I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, yeah, that might have been a more fun way to go, actually.
So how did you pick all of the restaurants?
It was difficult, really.
Did you do it? Or did you have help doing it?
Oh, I had a lot of help.
You did? But you didn't need help.
I did, especially with an industry like restaurants. They come and some can come and go very quickly.
It's true.
A few didn't make it in the book. They opened and closed within the time it took to write the book. So there was a lot of that. But I went on the radio, and I solicited there on the show, social media, Facebook. I asked people. They gave me.
And they came running.
They did.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, so you have, I'm a restaurant, freak and recipe freak.
Yes.
So when I saw those recipes in here, that was awesome. So here's Anthony J's Bistro, and that's in Mystic.
Yeah.
And that really caught my eye because I love a good bar.
Yeah. And I'm totally breaking the rules there. I mean, it's...
How so?
It's not on Route 1. There's a good maybe 2 dozen that you're getting off Route 1 and you're going a little sojourn, if you will. Yes.
Why? So this place, tell me about Anthony J's Bistro.
You've never been in?
I have not.
Because that one's been around a good long time. Tiny little place, and they do that old Italian. It comes out sizzling your food on stones that they place in front of you, and the food is still sizzling right on the stones.
And you did
it's
Penn
right before the bridge.
Oh, right before
on
the
your
bridge.
way into Mystic.
All right, and that one, they all caught my eye. But this one too, which is in Fairfield, which
you're going to my favorites.
This looks like an apothecary.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's a bar.
Right.
/ diner. Tell me about Pizzeria Malto.
Love it. And they have
let me hold it up again. Yeah.
And they have stills from like classic films, black and white films, all over the walls, and projectors projecting movies. No audio turned up. So it's really got this.
Oh my gosh.
I really don't quite know how to describe that, but there's classic cinema playing all around you, these black and white films. And it is a pizza bar, high-end cocktails, and because pizza now is this new, like, toppings. Have you noticed? It used to be you had about 8 to choose from. Now there's 30.
Right, mashed potatoes.
Oh, it's broken out.
You got clams.
It is.
So do you cook?
I do.
You do?
I always have, yeah.
Who taught you how to cook?
I would say my father, although I've shared that. You might be one of the few people who could appreciate this. The New Haven Register used to have this page called the Mini page. I don't know if you recall.
How far back does that go?
I'm going a ways.
Well, you're not that old.
But I was 12, I would say. Every Saturday in the Register, there'd be one page, and it was called the Mini page, and it had jokes and jumbles and a recipe. And it would give you a recipe a week. And I remember I would watch my father cook. Watching him cook was always very interesting. He was a kitchen sink cook. He would look in the refrigerator and find a stick of pepperoni and just throw it in.
I love that.
Yeah, it was all
Use
just
what you got, right?
One random piece of bologna, throw it in. You're wondering if the shade, like, are you smelling this? Kitchen sink cooking. So then I put those two together because one week I saw on the Mini page a very interesting meatloaf. So I said to the family on a Saturday, I want to cook for everybody. And the youngest of 4, 12, I don't think they thought this guy's going to be a heartbreaker, that this was heartbreaking news to them. Oh, you're going to cook? There's going to be a lot of Saturday nights home with this guy.
Food is love. It's okay.
It is. And I started doing it from then on. And Christmas morning was always me. From then on, and I've always loved it, But following recipes, I'm not very good at. I'm sure you are to the deep.
No,
right.
I need to follow recipes.
See, and I go off the grid. If it says 3 tablespoons, you know, I don't really follow them strictly.
You do it to taste.
I do.
So
That's it, you know.
Was this your idea to write this book?
No.
It was somebody else's idea.
Right. I went into
Globe Pequot?
Globe Pequot Press, which, thanks to you, is how I even had the meeting. And when you put me in touch, kind of inadvertently, I don't even know if you remember how that went.
Well, I think I said, Vinny, you should get him or something.
I have a lot of Globe Pequots. They kept popping up as I was trying to get my writing career going. And I kept thinking, how's this publisher in Guilford, Connecticut popping up in these searches, the biggest publishers across the country, internationally, and how's Guilford, Connecticut keep showing up here? So I had said to you one day when you told me your Katharine Hepburn book was with them, which I believe both of yours were with them, right?
No, the Katharine Hepburn, Remember Katharine Hepburn is.
I said, Ann, I've always wanted to write for them. And I remember you looking at me like, you have? And like, that's an odd dream. And then later that night, I got the email from you saying she's waiting for me. And here's the woman to contact, Amy.
Yes.
So I email her, and she says, come in, pitch me. So I thought, well, I don't even know what to...
You do stand-up. So did you do it in stand-up, the pitch?
She was excited by the fact that I'd been on the Howard Stern show, and I think she was looking to be entertained and do right by you, I would say. So I pitched her the idea of, you know what, we should do a book on the greatest concert like venues, like from Toad's Place to the Strand in Providence. And my Route 1, I guess it would have been a Route 1 music run.
Right. That's the second book.
I'd like to think so. She said, it looked like it was happening too, Ann. I mean, she had to say, yes, I've been to that venue. I saw that band there, and I'm like, oh, this is happening.
You should do cooking.
And then all of a sudden, I'm like, so we're off, right? And she goes, yeah, we'll do restaurants instead. And you're like, oh, dear, all right.
So how did you do it? So you took a photographer, or did the photographer take the pictures after you went to the restaurant?
Sometimes together, more often than not before.
Okay.
And even that, like, as the meeting was wrapping up, she said, this sounds great. Maybe you can get recipes, too. And I'm thinking, all right. But that was the editor's idea as well. She goes, and you'll need a photographer. And I said, you don't have a photographer for me here? You know, this sprawling office? You don't? And she said, no, but you must, with your contacts. And I'm like, no problem. I had to reach, I knew a girl I grew up with, I had met in summer school, had become a wedding photographer, Jennifer. I'm like, Jen, I don't think this book will happen. Yes. And a wonderful wedding photographer. And she said, I don't shoot food. She made it sound like there's a difference between a piece of cake and me and you.
Yes, there's an art to food.
And the pictures are really... She kind of stole my thunder a little bit, and now I think love shooting food. But I went to her and kind of was, I said, I don't think this book will happen if I don't get a guilt tripped her, basically. And she said, well, I'll do it.
And it worked.
And she drove to all of these places.
So how many venues have you, the book just came out, how many venues have you gone to telling people about this book?
We just did our book
RJ
launch.
Julia, did you go?
I was just at RJ Julia
yesterday,
and I stumbled onto a nice display there a week ago, and I thought, this is fantastic. This is my book, and it was very nautical, and there was an inflatable lobster next to it, and I posed for pictures. You know how it goes. And when I went back in yesterday, per chance, or 2 days ago, the display was still there. The book was gone. So I asked the woman. She said, we're sold out.
Now, as an author, is that thrilling or what?
Yeah.
Even if it's 10 copies, even if it's 20 copies, whatever it is, that means somebody, people know you, but somebody cared about what you're writing about. Because writing a book is very, very hard.
Harder than I think a lot of people realize.
You know, somebody said to me, and this is not my quote, but writing a book is like pushing a boulder up a hill alone.
Yes.
Because you write words and you think, well, who cares? Or, well, you know, maybe I could tell that story better, or something like that.
Yeah. And when it comes to people like myself and like you, you for so many years on the radio and television and other people writing for you, and it's like, no, that doesn't make you any better at crafting a sentence or...
Different kind of writing.
It is. It was a totally different animal.
This is not your first rodeo.
It isn't.
You've written other books on...
I did a nonfiction on growing up Italian, which was easier. And anecdotal and just full of funny stories, right?
How did it do?
Well, those were little boutique publishers, and it did well.
Okay.
And interestingly, it predated Twitter as this weapon, and it predated Facebook even. So I wasn't able to hype it as much. You know, you and I have discussed too how these are great weapons, social media, but at the same time, it gives the publisher the out of, what do you need us to promote it for? Look at your Facebook following.
Well,
and
you have a radio show, a little radio show there.
That's it. So, and then I did a zombie novel. Just one.
Why?
I don't know. Again, I found myself in a pitch, and I pitched this great story. Same thing. It ended with the gentleman from that very small publisher in Texas. I love. Let's just make them all zombies. And I again left like, all right.
What kind of research did you do for zombies?
And this was just when that Walking Dead was taking off, which, you know, the show was really blowing up. So I had that zombies were just becoming in vogue. There were a lot of, it sounds silly, but at the time there were 3 huge movies coming out on them. And it's pretty easy stuff. They just, yeah, they don't, yeah.
And they make their sound.
The dialogue was
so I'm going to take
non-existent.
I'm going to take a left turn here.
Do it.
Off of your Route 1 food run.
There are many left turns taken off of Route 1.
How did you end up in radio?
Oof, that one goes back a ways.
You grew up where?
In Morse Cove in New Haven, and interestingly, I was at Lighthouse Park in New Haven. If you really want to go way back, and WELI was there, just doing like man on the street stuff, and asking people questions. And I was one of the people. I answered a question, and the guy found it hysterical.
How old were you?
I was 26.
And what were you doing at the time?
Freelance writing for the Register, writing about music. That's why music found its way into the book here. Then the gentleman who was doing the show at the time, his name was Mike Robb. He was doing mornings for WELI. He said, you should come in and like be my funny guy on Fridays. And I thought, that's odd. I really, you know, so I just started doing Fridays.
So the funny guy on Fridays, so what would you do?
I would just go in there and he would talk. It was so odd because I didn't grow up listening to radio. I don't know if you did. I didn't know that world existed. I just played cassettes.
Yeah.
So to see that these
8-track or cassettes?
Cassettes. Although
you had some 8-tracks.
There was some straggling, but I didn't know this was going on. And he would tell stories, and I would just lob in little wisecracks. And it went on for a few months. They paid me in gift certificates. Not much has changed. And one day, I ran into Glenn Beck in the hallway, who was doing mornings next door at KC 101. And he said, I've heard some talk that you're in WELI. You're a funny guy. You should come over with me one day. And I went over there. And
are you 30 now,
same
or
thing,
are you still in your 20s?
Knocking on it. By the time I was added full-time to Glenn's show, I was a month shy of turning 30. And then it was off, yeah, just like that.
And you did that for how many years?
Well, with Glenn, 3. And then I stayed on for another 5.
Right.
Yeah.
And how did the project come about?
In full circle, too, to WELI. Well, I left to do some stuff for satellite and to write one of those books. I was on VH1. I'm trying to make all this stuff happen, but I was also a first-time dad. And I still keep in touch. Clear Channel became iHeart, and all those relationships, you know how it goes, that you forged. And one gentleman wound up back in Connecticut who had offered me a job in Atlanta at one point. And he said, I have a job offer for you. And I said, this is that Atlanta guy, the top 10 market. Where is he at now? And I said, well, what's the offer? And he goes, WELI. And I thought it was a joke. I'm like, how are you here in Connecticut? And he had left one station, wound up here in Connecticut, and he said, I think you should do talk, which I thought was crazy because I'm just a punchline guy.
You keep falling into stuff.
I do. I did. Radio really saved my life because the writing was never going to pay the bills, and I still don't think it ever would. I think the days of the John Grishams and the Stephen Kings are over.
Gosh, I hope not, but
blogs and the like, I think they're over.
But there's so much clutter now. How do you cut through it, right? I mean, everybody's blogging. How did Howard Stern happen? And how were you on the radio with him on 9/11?
That's another one. His wise guy, I guess every radio show had this one guy who sits there and waits for the opening to just say something funny. It was so weird, such a weird way to make a living. His was Jackie, the joke man, Martling at the time, who had left abruptly. So they had this empty seat, and they thought, Simultaneously, Kathy Lee had just left, and Regis. So at the same time, Regis, if you know that whole thing,
right.
they just decided to do a year of let's try somebody different every day. And a gentleman reached out to me, proximity, I guess, with New York, and said, would you want to sit in Jackie's chair for a day? And I thought, of course I would. Wound up being 2, then 3, then 4. Then they told me, you're in the final stretch. You might get this job. We'll see you on September 11th, 2001 for your final audition. And I said, I got to bring it. This is a big day. And at 8:45 that morning.
So you show up for work. What time on 9/11? In this city, did you commute in from Connecticut?
I would stay overnight. They would suggest that, which was just, those days were behind me, Ann, of driving in at 2 a.m. I said, I'll be at a Holiday Inn down the street. So I would take the cab in about 5:30 in the morning. And it was just your same old show. But at 8:45, when one of the producers came running in and said, a plane just hit, you know, the World Trade Center. It's still surreal.
Physically, where are you in New York doing this show? From the Trade Center, where are you physically?
It was the old, I'm trying to think of it because he's not even at that station anymore, and I can't even remember the street address. He would leave only a few years later to go over to Sirius.
Right.
Always,
right.
Midtown.
Okay. So somebody says a plane just hit a building.
Right, and that's all we knew. And prior to that, there were little stories of, I'm trying to think who it was. It was a famous an act, maybe John Travolta had, or who? Harrison Ford was like this novice.
At this point, you thought it was a small plane.
Oh, right, absolutely. So I stayed in audition mode. I'm like, it's Harrison Ford is flying his plane again, and it went. But then the weird moment of, you know, we just heard that a second one hit, and the room still. It didn't sink in any big way, and I kept going. They told me this was my final audition, so I kept going, and made another crack about another celebrity with a plane, and then somebody picked up an image, and you could see the smoke, and you saw the magnitude of it, and Howard turned to me at one point, and he even acknowledged, he goes, all right, so Vinny, stop auditioning. He said it nicely and kind of comically, and I've been on the show quite often ever since on the anniversaries.
Because now it's getting serious. You know, he says, stop what you're doing.
Yeah, and you know, the eeriest thing, the strangest thing was Howard Stern. We all associate him with certain things, but he knew everything. He said, like, within 20 minutes, it's that Saddam Hussein, like, he started spouting names that I hadn't even...
And you're still live on the radio.
Yeah, right on the... Yeah. But he was so well-versed. I had never even heard that name before prior to 9/11. He knew who it was, why it was, where it was. He's a real news guy. And everything he said that he suspected it to be, it wound up being. And we stayed on until about 1 o'clock that day. We just stayed on and took calls from frantic New Yorkers who some were reporting live from the streets, others were terrified.
You made the switch from, you know, this, I'm auditioning to serious guy. I mean, that was uncharted territories for everybody.
Yes, yeah. And you know, and in retrospect, that might have lent itself to the tone got so serious that when the gentleman who offered me the job on WELI said, I think you can do talk, I wondered why. And he said, well, you know, you tell a good story, and I wonder now in retrospect of where we went on that day if I covered it well enough, because I'm not a junkie when it comes to politics. Most of what's happening in the world today.
But I've seen you on the debate stage because I was the moderator.
We did that together, right.
And I think you were very thought-provoking, and I think you asked some questions that surprised people.
Yeah, yeah, especially that opening one. But that's that was more a dad asking a question than a radio host or a moderator.
But that's what people want to ask, and that's what people want to hear.
Yeah, I think so. Because half these stories that I see, I just, you know, Sandy Hook, I got called back in. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they said, we need you to come in and go live on the air. I said, well, I'm picking my son up at school. I'm going to have to bring my son. He was 6. He was a first grader. So I'm covering Sandy Hook with my six-year-old first grader reporting on this. And so I've had a couple moments of, and I think it's the dad who shows up more than the broadcaster, but you might be right that maybe that's what resonates. I don't know.
I think it does, because everybody can relate to that.
Yeah.
So the Vinnie Penn project, it's going along. How has it changed since you started it?
Well, when I accepted it, I said, all right, I'm going to come up with a little tagline. You know I like my taglines.
Yes.
Like, go feed yourself. I brought you your own little bumper sticker somewhere around.
And this is a rollicking road trip to the best eateries. But you like your little sayings.
I do. So mine was the Vinnie Penn Project, Parenthood, Hollywood, and the Neighborhood. And I thought, that's going to be my angle. I'll tell stories about being a dad, what plagues our children today. One story you had done at that time, I remember using about kids and internet usage. I was going to do my celebrity side, Hollywood, and the neighborhood would be, I'll be local, I'll be New Haven. And it went that way for a couple of years, fine. But Sandy Hook would be about 3 years out, and that was really a turning point of, and I think we all started feeling rage and frustration at both sides of the aisle, and their inability to just lay down their weapons and come up with resolutions. And even recent developments, it's like one day I just wanted to keep both of my kids home from school, and I started this past year seriously thinking, after Florida, thinking, I don't know if the school's going to continue for you guys.
And can you believe that schools...
No, I
think
cannot.
of them as not safe. Schools
No, I cannot.
Were wonderful places. How old are your kids now?
My daughter's going to be a sophomore, and my son is going to be in 7th grade. Yeah.
The world is changing. You have lots to talk about.
Yeah.
Who are your viewers? Who calls in? Who are they?
That's interesting too, and has changed. Conservative, angry Americans, angry Connecticut residents, people just chomping at the bit for Malloy to go because they think that's going to end every woe here in Connecticut. But I'm happy to say that it began with a lot of crotchety old, Jimmy, let me tell you something. I'm just there like, it's Vinny, but go ahead. To now there's a lot of people, same boat people, 40s, early 50s, parents, terrified parents, and Connecticut residents who want to stay here. They want their kid, you might be going through this too. They don't want their kids to have to leave just to find a job.
I think that is, by and large, in a lot of different places. Do you do stand-up anymore?
I still do. Yeah, I still do. That was great for. I'm really all over the road now.
Do you get paid to do it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I have very well. Other times, okay. Sometimes, much like bands, you're looking for the manager at the end of the night. Place is packed, and you're like, he left, and you have to track down your money. There's a lot of that, which I don't really like. But yeah, I still do a lot of that.
Are you doing what you thought you would be doing, and are there more things to do, more books to write, more stand-up to do, a different television show or radio show to do?
I still
How old are you?
I'm 50. I just turned 51.
Okay, you're still a baby, so you still got time.
I still want that novel. I still want that big novel, and that's what stresses me.
So it is the writing that jazzes.
Always was, yeah. And I had a day where I looked at radio, and what a blessing radio has been for me. And there was one day when I realized, I'm writing what I do on the radio show, and I could just write more. So then I started really writing these big 10-minute monologues, because talk radio you can, as opposed to when I was doing Top 40 and you had 3 minutes in between songs. But I don't want to lose sight of the songs either, and that's why, because I still love music, so I have song selections for every restaurant you go to in the book. That's my favorite part.
Did you pick those?
Yeah, that was me.
All right, so let's take one.
And so I think the novel would involve like a guy who maybe never had his hit song. I don't know. I could maybe come up with it.
Well, just write it down, because I think you've got another book.
Yeah.
Okay, so The Log Cabin in Clinton, soundtrack suggestion is what?
Pink House, Ain't That America, John Mellencamp. Is that a good one?
Well, of course it is. He's from Indiana. That's where I grew up. But, but why?
How serendipitous.
Yes. So, but why?
Well, the log cabin, and that's a great entry, too. Have you been?
I have not. I'm embarrassed to say.
Oh, no. There's a lot of in here that...
There's so many great
Connecticut, like, institutions, and I was, same as you, embarrassed to be, this is my first time in here.
It's a great state.
But the log cabin just reeks of that Americana and that feel, and yet, and I ordered the veal parm. My father would have just, at the log cabin.
How was it?
Well, it was divine.
I hear you get a lot of food there.
Oh, you do?
Like a ton.
You do. But I mean, it's a pot roast meatloaf and a lot of seafood, too. And I ordered the veal parm, which I thought was...
All right, Luigi's Restaurant.
Oh,
you pick.
What did I do for that one? Layla. Oh, yeah, that goes without saying. That just had a very... like Pacino and De Niro, and definitely Joe Pesci would be leaving there, and of course Layla from the movie Casino. It just felt like a hit could be put on someone at that restaurant. Over a nice meal, a little sambuca, and the word could go down.
Right. All right, Stony Creek Market.
Yeah.
You picked.
Yeah. It's so funny you're bringing up this one. I just thought about this one on the way over. Blink-182's All the Small Things. And you know, I thought... that's misleading because it might suggest small portions, but it's really about how it's the little things, because her recipe for her meatball, it was like her grandmother's. The last minute, she's the only one. She held out. Of 100 restaurants, last minute she said, I can't do it. I won't give it. Yeah.
So it should be in here, but it's not.
It's not. Yeah.
So she thought long and hard on that.
And I said, you can alter it. Leave a few ingredients out. Some chefs confided in me. I'll give you most of it. And I own up to that in the prologue to the book.
Have you ever thought about putting out a book that's got your recipes in it?
No.
It's never too late to do that.
Although I did contribute to an anthology once that necessitated me putting in a recipe.
What is it?
It was a steak sandwich with crunched barbecue potato chips over it, and now Bobby Flay is like famous for crumbling potato chips over it.
Did he copy you?
I believe it's possible. That's all I'm going to say. But I want to point out the place too, just really quick, in Guilford, because you must know it.
On Route 1.
So unique. You sit on tree stumps and walk on.
It's fabulous.
And I put Rihanna. Cheers to that, because everybody's always toasting each other. Strangers. Yeah.
That's a great way to live.
Yeah.
Favorite recipe that you make, what is it?
It would probably be my cutlet. It would probably be my veal milanese, or pork.
Is it written down somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay, so will you give it to me so that I can give it to everybody that's watching?
Oh, yeah, I mean, sure, it's not overly ambitious, and there's no secret to it, but I do make a mean one. It's where you buy the cutlet, I find, is the secret. You must...
Of course.
And I go to Vinnie's Importing. Is that, say, a block away from here?
All right.
Do you know where I mean?
I don't, but now I do.
Sliced so thin, it has to be thin.
Yeah.
And they're delicious.
Okay, so we're wrapping up doing this. You're going to send me this recipe.
Yes, ma'am.
Like tonight.
All right, all right.
So I can put it online.
Sure.
This has been so much fun.
Well, I owe you,
no, you don't
for
owe me
making this happen.
No,
that was fantastic.
This is awesome. Keep writing, but I think you need to combine somehow the stand-up, the music, food, being a dad, and you got it, because I think you point out that America is very divided right now. We need to bring civility back. We can agree to disagree, but we need to talk.
I agree. But that is my biggest lesson to my two kids is pick the one and stay focused on it. I think one of the things I regret is I'm like, I'll do it. I'll try that. I'll do stand-up, and I'll write, and okay, I'll try radio. And I tell them, like, pick one and maybe just stay focused on the one.
But that's not who you
because
are.
You could get scattershot.
But that's okay. That a broad stroke. You've done all right for yourself.
Yeah, I'm no Darren Kramer, and that's the dream. That's the dream.
He's from Wisconsin.
Yeah,
okay.
Is he really? I don't know if I did.
Yeah. And he's not
I'm the only Connecticut lifer, I guess, out of the three of us. Then, right?
I was born in a Quonset hut in Texas.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
San Angelo, Texas.
Yeah. So your transplants both.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we're okay.
Yeah. Oh, better than okay.
Vinnie Penn, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
And again, the book is Route 1, food run. Thanks for watching.
Spend one this in. Who's this girl? Spend all night kissing, and if one was right here, then who else is missing? Got a little sidetracked if I'm a wishing to find the keys to the door, but it's also a metaphor. Things keep locked in the grocery store of my mind. Just to save time, I'll skip right ahead to the last ride.